are back from inside 30 Rockefeller Plaza here in New York, just a half hour into our primetime coverage. And for days, our political director, Chuck Todd, has been talking about West Virginia. If the Republicans want to wrestle away control of the Senate, all roads led through the West Virginia race. For them tonight, it was not to be. The new senator-elect is the current Governor Manchin. He spoke to a rally tonight. Here's what he had to say moments ago.
Because tomorrow starts the rebuilding, the road of rebuilding America. We must start tomorrow. And I really believe that Washington could learn a few things and a few lessons from West Virginia.
Yes!
He was a ball player before he got involved in politics, and he went up against a mine owner, well-known figure in the state before this race, Joe Manchin over John Racy. And you see the margin there so far. Also in Louisiana, David Vitter. Here's welcome to Louisiana politics. Rhodes Scholar found himself wrapped up in a prostitution scandal, and the Democrats put up Congressman Melanson against him. Couldn't convert the deal, so the Republican Senator Vitter, reelected, goes back to the U.S. Senate from the state of Louisiana. Lester Holt has been looking all evening long at what voters are telling us after they vote and run right into our exit pollsters about the attitudes and opinions that motivated what they're trying to say across the country tonight. And Lester, a new political force effective this election emerges.
We're talking about the Tea Party, Brian, and everyone knew they would have an impact, but how much? Well, we've got some numbers here that really give you a sense. It turns out there are a lot of Tea Party supporters out there. Listen to this. 41% nationwide say they are for the Tea Party. 31% are opposed. Among the supporters, an overwhelming 87% voted for the Republican candidate in their local House race. Now, who are these people that identify themselves with the Tea Party? Well, 90% are white, 55% are male, and 74% are 45 years old or older. Now, as far as the political views, they're concerned. 70% describe themselves as conservative, 58% as Republicans, 79% of them voted for John McCain in 2008. Now, looking at what the Tea Partiers want, 9 out of 10 want to limit government. Just 8% of them think government should play a bigger role in our lives. And their priorities for the next Congress, 48% want to reduce the budget deficit. This is a huge deal. Just 29% want to see spending on jobs. And showing how serious they are about the deficit, just 18% of Tea Partiers want the next Congress to cut taxes. 18% want the next Congress to cut taxes. By the way, when it comes to the president's policies, Brian, 9 out of 10 Tea Partiers say they think they've made things worse. Let's go back to you now. All
right, Lester, hold on some of the data we're learning about this political force effective this election, though, building for some time. And Tom Brokaw, here you have an establishment Republican Party. Just as members of the so-called establishment, this was new thinking this past cycle. Members of the media, people in Washington. These Tea Party members are going to arrive now in Washington, duly elected. What happens?
And they're not cheering the old Republican leaders, by the way, because they remember during the George Bush years that John McCain described the Republican Congress and the Senate as a bunch of spending like a bunch of drunken sailors. So they've got them in their crosshairs. They're determined to come to Washington and to take over the Republican Party, not to be just an ancillary wing of it in some kind. I've been talking to some of the Tea Party people, and one of them is Michael Leahy, who was one of the founding fathers, and he said we want constitutional government, we want fiscal sanity, a free marketplace, and we want to get rid of Obamacare. If we have to introduce a bill every day and let the president veto it every day, that's what we're determined to do. Matt Kibbe, who speaks for Freedom Works, the Dick Armey organization, has said we want this message to go across the country. The people want less from their federal government. And we've heard that before when it bumps up against reality and you're talking about closing a base or shutting down an agricultural substation of some kind, that it gets pretty tough to do, Brian.
Reminds me of the signs at more than one rally this past season: get the government out of my Social Security, get the government out of my Medicare. Matt Taibbi has written about this topic for Rolling Stone, on and on, that many of the people he has met at rallies have been recipients of government. Mark Whitaker, the expression constitutional government comes up again and again and again. What does it mean to you?
Well, you know, it's interesting. Our pollsters actually put out a poll and asked
would you like to write in a question, or, you know, and what people wanted to know or talk about was returning to the Constitution. Now, it's a little unclear what these Tea Partiers mean by that. A lot of them seem to be originalists. Basically, they like the Constitution that was written in the 18th century, and a lot of the amendments that have come since, they're not so wild about. But again, I think it comes back to this question David was talking about it earlier, is the role of government. And I think that we have a country now that is very skeptical about how much government can achieve. They think that there's been too much expansion of government in the first 2 years of the Obama administration. I think that they have fired Nancy Pelosi tonight in the House, but they put President Obama on probation. And what they're saying is, we want a new approach to government from you in the next 2 years, or else we may fire you too.
Andrea Mitchell, Nancy Pelosi among independents, 8% approval rating. What happened? How much her fault? How much the fact that this election needed a demon for those on the other side?
Well, the Republicans very successfully nationalized it, and she became their prime target in all of the campaign ads. She wasn't campaigning. We saw her very memorably a week ago in Minnesota, hitching a ride back on Air Force One, but not appearing at the rally with the President of the United States. So she couldn't appear in public. She wasn't going out to the districts and doing other than fundraisers. But the other piece was that a lot of folks feel she never took the advantage of her gender and her historic role and translated that to average working women. Perhaps it's a matter of class. She was always so perfectly attired and coiffed. That's a very sexist thing. But I think I can say, just as a political analyst, that she didn't have that working class feel that the Democratic rank and file wanted, and she became the obvious target. The other thing that I was just thinking with what Mark just said is the Tea Party activists are coming to Washington talking about less government, less spending, and where it's immediately going to, the rubber's going to hit the road, even in the lame duck session with the outgoing Congress, is the Bush tax cut extension. That is a lot of money, yet people want it in the Republican side. Chuck
Todd standing by in our By the Numbers studio. Chuck, South Carolina is in your crosshairs right now, I understand.
It is. I want to tell you something, though. So far, 7 of those McCain districts I told you about in the House, we had 49 of them, of those Democrats holding McCain districts. Well, 7 races have been called. So far, Republicans are 7 out of 7. But I want to tell you what's going on in South Carolina, because you're looking for something going against the grain. Let's go to the state of South Carolina. First, the governor's race. Remember, Nikki Haley, one of the stars, one of the Mama Grizzlies. Well, Democrats have been telling me about this race for weeks. They said Vincent Shaheen has the support of the business community, that many of the things about Mark Sanford and the fact that Nikki Haley was close to the outgoing governor, Mark Sanford, politically, that was hurting her a little bit. This is going to be a nail-biter. I can tell you, our folks in the boiler room say it's going to take us a long time to call this. The fact that this race is so close tells you everything. But then I want to talk about something that has to do with Congress, and I talk about this in my measurement of the Civility Caucus, or the Anti-Civility Caucus. I'm going to stay in South Carolina and tell you about Joe Wilson, memorable, of course, for the You Lie moment. Well, look at this. This is a neck-and-neck race, a very Republican district. And Joe Wilson and Rob Miller, the moment of You Lie, if you remember, Democrats raised a ton of money nationally online for Rob Miller. This has been a very close race. They've been swapping back and forth all night. And to stick with my civility theme, Alan Grayson is sort of the Democrat version for some people when it comes to somebody that hasn't shown the proper amount of civility, say, that other people believe should be shown in the House of Representatives. He went down big tonight to a Republican named Daniel Webster in the state of Florida. This is actually a swing district, and he went down by a lot. There were a lot of progressive Democrats, Brian, who said, boy, Alan Grayson, he's showing fight. He's showing that you can fight, you can do this. The fact that he lost by nearly 20 points is going to send shivers down the spine of some progressives saying, you know what, maybe that isn't the way to go. So if Alan Grayson and Joe Wilson both go down, Brian, that maybe say something about maybe the public does want a little more civility in Congress, getting mad at folks that yell, you lie, or getting mad at a guy like Alan Grayson who accuses his opponent of being a member of the Taliban.
Right. He did have that brief flaming moment in the media that there's something about that name, Daniel Webster. I can't put my finger on it. Hey, Chuck, as we go to a break, I'm going to show you a tale of 2 candidates tonight. Christine O'Donnell in Delaware. She has come out and conceded. Boy, this is talk about media attention. A woman who turned away one of the great names in Delaware politics, became the nominee, and then paid dearly the price for some of her comments in the past and the public attention. So Delaware politics, there you have it tonight. And in Florida, age 39, father of 4, another former athlete. He is the senator-elect from the state of Florida, as we mentioned, a Cuban-American, Marco Rubio. And when we come back, the head of the Democratic Party will talk about the tally so far.
The things we cared about on this.
In the 43 minutes we've been on the air, the major story, make no mistake, was news at the top of this hour that our projection is that the Democrats would hand over control to an aggressive Republican Party tonight in the House of Representatives. And further, it would be 238 to 197 seats when all the races were in and the votes were tallied. This is a sea change politically 2 years after the election of Barack Obama as president. We are joined by the head of the Democratic Party, former governor of the Commonwealth of Virginia, Tim Kaine. And Governor, what happened in just the space of 2 years after that wave that elected your president and so many new members of both houses? What happened?
Well, Brian, we'll be looking through the details for days to come, probably weeks to come. But I guess what we're seeing right now, and obviously polls are still open, and there's going to be close races all the way out to Hawaii, and we want folks to continue to vote. But we're likely to end up with a Democrat in the White House, with maybe a majority of Republican governors, a Democratic Senate, and a Republican House. I think this is maybe a reset back to what we believed even on Inauguration Day. The American public is closely divided, and maybe the big picture message is from the electorate, they want us to all work together, and we're going to have to keep moving the nation forward.
In your view, do the Democrats have the right leader for the Senate going forward, provided you hold on to control? Do you think the president has the right people around him in the West Wing of the White House? The rap from the business community on this president has been that no one anywhere near him has ever made a payroll.
You know, Brian, I hear that rap, but I also, would just point out the facts. The president came in on Inauguration Day with a shrinking GDP in America, the first time that had happened since the 1930s, and GDP has now grown 5 months in a row. Instead of losing private sector jobs for 22 months, we've now grown 9 months in a row in private sector jobs. The president, working with Democrats without any help from Republicans, have turned a shrinking economy into a growing one. Clearly, there's going to be changes. There always are at this point. You've already seen the White House move forward aggressively on issues like deficit control. It'll be interesting to see if Republicans join in. Small business lending, which Republicans tried to filibuster for many months. There are a number of priorities going forward where I think the American public clearly want to see Democrats and Republicans working together. We feel very heartened by the results in the Senate, but obviously disappointed in the House. I've got some very close friends, especially one Virginia Congressman, Rick Boucher, who has been declared tonight that his opponent is going to win, that, it's a tough night for us in the House. But the big picture message, I guess, nationally is, hey, all of you guys have to work together. We've seen some progress, but we got to see an awful lot more.
All right, Mr. Chairman, former Governor of Virginia, Tim Kaine, thank you for your time, sir, for being with us tonight. The chairman of the Democratic Party, who, by the way, on Sunday sat across from my friend David Gregory on Meet the Press and predicted the Democrats would hold the House. A lot of predictions are failing tonight. Let's get updated on a few races here. Perfectly awful race for governor of New York. Oh, I'm sorry, we're going to go Missouri Senate first. Roy Blunt, this is a brand new call just this second. The veteran member of Congress against the latest scion of the far-reaching Carnahan political family. dynasty in the state of Missouri. Now to governor of New York. Carl Palladino, the Republican upstart, the Buffalo businessman. Andrew Cuomo, of course, the son of former Governor Mario Cuomo, the Attorney General, in a race a lot of New Yorkers just stopped watching, candidly, after a good long while. 63-34, the percentage is there. Sam Brownback, a longtime senator from the Sunflower State, is going to be the governor of the state of Kansas. And South Carolina, the race we're still watching, too close to call. Nikki Haley, the Indian American, against Vincent Shaheen in that race that our Andrea Mitchell has been gathering on. One of many tight and absolutely crucial governor's races tonight. That is a race with Nikki Haley, who they hope will be a rising star in the Republican Party, endorsed early by Sarah Palin. But indeed, as Chuck Todd was reporting earlier, Shaheen doing a lot better than people had expected, and that race is going to be one we're going to be watching very closely. This is the daughter of Indian immigrants. Right. 2/3 of the nominees backed by Sarah Palin. The initial stages went on to be their party's nominees. In this race, particularly in this season of dirt and grime getting on everybody, Nikki Haley has battled charges of an affair throughout this race, and it was much closer since her days on the cover of one of the national news weeklies. And in fact, what Nikki Haley and Shaheen are both state legislators, people from the South Carolina establishment, and so it's really a real test of the Sarah Palin imprimatur there. All right, when we have a brand new result. Sometimes these are told to me as we see them on the screen, but that's the way the computers are supposed to generate these results. Deval Patrick coming back in Massachusetts, a former Justice Department official, former corporate lawyer, and friend and confidant to the President of the United States. In the Bay State, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, coming back as governor. Not a done deal. We're going to continue our coverage right after this break. We're back here in New York. This is our Decision 2010 coverage, winding down just the first hour of 8 or 9 hours of coverage into the night tonight. And the two magic numbers throughout this election cycle were 39 and 10. Republicans needed 39 seats in the House to change control, take it away from the Democrats. There's our projection made earlier this hour. They would indeed do that with seats to spare. In the Senate, it's been a tougher road. Everyone knew it would be. They are up a net gain of 3 at this hour. By the way, those two white boxes you'll see all night, the independents, they caucus on the Democratic side, but a net gain 3 so far for the GOP. And in Nevada, this is the race so many are watching. Sharon Engel going up against the majority leader for the Democrats, Harry Reid. And we have a tight race. We knew we would. If Reid wins, he will go back to the U.S. Senate, damaged as the leader of that party. If he loses, of course, he loses, and they start again. But Savannah Guthrie, who covers the Obama White House for us, what has been the frustration among Democrats as they look at the man who has been their leader for the first 2 years of their effort in the Senate?
Well, Harry Reid in so many ways personifies what a lot of people are frustrated with about Washington. He certainly is not the most eloquent senator. He's somebody who's gotten in trouble from time to time for impolitic remarks. But what people will say about Harry Reid is that he is a brilliant tactician. And one thing I've heard White House officials say over and over again over these last few months is, the bottom line is Harry Reid would get it done. If it's health care, if it's financial regulatory reform, it's the stimulus, he manages to get it done, and they're interested in results. And so many people in the media have pointed out his challenger, Sharon Engel, less than a perfect candidate herself, but her attacks on him for living in a Washington Ritz-Carlton hotel, among other things, have stuck. So an update on your local races for those of you will continue here in New York in the meantime.
Let's go out west now to California, where there's a lot to watch tonight in the race for U.S. Senate and the race for governor. Our own Lee Cowan live for us tonight in Oakland at Jerry Brown's campaign headquarters. Lee, good evening.
Good evening, Brian. Yeah, this could actually end up being one of the places that the president gets a little bit of good news tonight. If you look at the Senate race, Democrat Senator Barbara Boxer came in with about an 8-point advantage over her Republican challenger, Carly Fiorina. She was the head of Hewlett-Packard, former head of Hewlett-Packard. And then if you look at the governor's race here, former two-term governor Jerry Brown came in with about a 10-point advantage over his Republican challenger, Meg Whitman, in this race. We are, as you say, at the Brown election night headquarters here, which they hope will end up being the victory night headquarters. This would be certainly very familiar territory for Jerry Brown. He was governor from 1975 to 1983. He was the mayor of Oakland. He was also the current attorney general as well. And all during this campaign, he had suggested that the way he ran state government, his experience in state government, was the antithesis to the way Governor Schwarzenegger had run this state. And if you look at it, though, you can certainly say that he was outspent by a long shot by Meg Whitman. Some would even argue that she out-campaigned him as well. And if you look at the fact that Democrats have such an advantage here in terms of registered voters over Republicans, about a 13% advantage, in fact, the fact that Whitman was able to keep this race so close all the way up until the very end was really a testament not only to her campaign, but also to the voter outrage here. We want to check in with my colleague George Lewis, who's standing by at the Hilton Hotel in Universal City at the Whitman election night headquarters with more on what's going on there. George, good evening.
Good evening, Lee. The Whitman people are hoping that a late wave of Republican turnout and enthusiasm will prove the pollsters wrong and propel their candidate to victory. Meg Whitman said today that she has no regrets about spending $141 million of her personal fortune on this campaign, something that enabled her to saturate the airways with ads, up to 1,300 TV spots a day at one point. But some political experts think it was a case of overkill, that Californians got tired of all the attack ads. At a California Women's Conference appearance with her opponent, Jerry Brown, moderator Matt Lauer of the Today Show asked both candidates if they'd mutually agree to halt the negative campaigns. When Whitman wouldn't commit to doing that, the audience booed her. Then there was the way she handled the controversy over her housekeeper, an illegal immigrant. In a state where 21% of the registered voters are Latinos, that could hurt. But in one of her final campaign appearances this morning, Whitman said she felt good about the way things were going for her. Lee?
All right, thanks, George. Well, we've heard so much about voter turnout in this race, and here in California, it turns out that more than 7 million people actually asked to have a mail-in ballot, but only, we're told, about half of those have been returned by today, by Election Day so far. So what that may mean is that if this race, the governor's race, or the Senate race, either one of those are very tight, or certainly any of the local races, that these last-minute tabulations are certainly going to be a big, big factor in this race. Polls close here in just a little more than an hour. Now let's go back to Brian Williams in New York at the election headquarters there. Brian, back to you.
Lee Cowan and George Lewis both in California for us tonight. Thanks. That is going to do it for this edition of Nightly News from our Decision 2010 headquarters here in New York. And a reminder, stay with this NBC station. We'll be back on the air in prime time tonight. And again, after your late local news, our late night coverage of Decision 2010. I'm Brian Williams in New York. Good night for now.